3, 2, 1.
You know what? If you feel lack and limitation rearing its ugly head, look this way. If you suffer from a negative perspective on life, look this way. If you feel you have no time for spiritual practice, look this way. If your bandwidth is being taken up by old stories or junk thinking or whatever, look this way. If you feel you are suffering from the metabolic burden of uncertainty because of the news and other chaoses going on in the world, look this way. This way is the science of mind. Not the book itself, not the organization based on the book and the other teachings of Ernest Holmes and others, of course, but the science of the laws of nature, the universal laws that the book teaches. In the answer to a question, do scientists pray and what do they pray for? Albert Einstein wrote this back to a little girl who actually asked that question. Do scientists pray and what do they pray for? Einstein wrote, scientific research is based on the assumption that all events, including the actions of mankind, are determined by the laws of nature. Therefore, a research scientist will hardly be inclined to believe that events could be influenced by a prayer, that is, by a wish addressed to a supernatural being. However, we have to admit that our actual knowledge of these laws is only an incomplete piece of work, so that ultimately the belief in the existence of fundamental, all-embracing laws also results on a sort of faith. All the same, this faith has been largely justified by the success of science. On the other hand, however, everyone who is seriously engaged in the pursuit of science becomes convinced that the laws of nature manifest the existence of a spirit vastly superior to that of men, and one in the face of which we, with our modest powers, must feel humble. The pursuit of science leads, therefore, to a religious feeling of a special kind. He's talking about science as a religious feeling, the act of the use of the empirical evidence method of science is a spiritual state. Now, this teaching isn't about wishing, pleading, begging, or even requesting something from some supernatural being. This teaching professes the art, act, and science of inducing thought on the subjective side of life, the subjective side of life being the divine. Setting the law of cause and effect, or the law of attraction, you can call that law whatever you want, in motion. It is an invocation that creates purposeful rapport with the universal energy of creation, the laws of the universe, whatever you want to call that power and presence. It is a communion with a power greater than us that we may not fully understand yet. Because remember, 500 years ago, we didn't even know what electromagnetism was. Now, that didn't mean it didn't exist and wasn't at work. But now we're quite dependent on the products that are run by electromagnetism, that were created through the efforts and use of electromagnetism. I was watching this discussion with five scientists, and they were talking about consciousness and the brain. And one of them was Barbara J. King, who is the professor emerita and former chair of the Department of Anthropology at the College of William and Mary. She's also a neuroscientist and a psychologist. And she had some very interesting things to say, and I just want to tell you a few of them. She said, brains are wired to predict. Predictions our beliefs. We are wired for belief. Feeling is at the core of the wiring of our brains. Feeling is believing. It is the root of belief. Isn't that great? She went on to talk about, and so did the other guests on this symposium, talk about how we impose meaning on events, thoughts, and beliefs through our feelings. We decide the value of things, of events, thoughts, and beliefs. We decide the value of them through our feelings. It's like currency. Rocks used to be a common currency. Salt and barley, too. They were a common currency, but not anymore, really. Your mortgage only has value because society has imposed that contractual piece of paper has meaning. In itself, the piece of paper doesn't have meaning. The $100 bill in your pocket doesn't have meaning, except that we have put meaning to it. We have a feeling about that $100 bill. We have a feeling about that mortgage that makes it so. Feeling, consciousness, and belief are the prime ways to look this way instead of another. There's a value that we put in the transcendence of consciousness and conscious thought. There is meaning in experiencing the wonderment and awestruckness of nature. There's a power in our awareness practices, our affirmative prayer, our use of affirmations, visualizations, vision boarding and meditation, or even in earthing. When you put your feet in the grass, that's earthing. Chakra balancing, Reiki, and other energy and healing practices, biofeedback, cognitive therapies, and even some psychedelic usage. It's all a power of awareness. There's a payment that we make in self-talk, in our perspective in life, in our vision statements in life, and other self-development practices that change our beliefs, and like journal writing and morning pages and goal setting and stuff like that. And with the feelings that are behind these values, these meanings, these payments and power, comes the experiences we've decided we require in our lives. It takes a turning towards your faith in those things, towards your idea and your value of those things, and the faith and value of this creative power, this greater creative power that we believe in. And that is there, whether we believe it or not, for you to tap into. Whether you know you're tapping into it directly by calling it by a name or a thing or an energy, you still are tapping into it. Your belief is still happening. Even if you do the kind of wishing prayer, the belief system, the value you're putting to that idea of wishing is the value that comes back to you in your manifestation, because that's what the laws of the universe listen to. So it takes a turning of your faith in a greater creative power that is there always for you to tap into, to reach out and be inspired by, to grab onto and empower your journey, to use its energy to energize you. That's what brings your manifestations to life. That connection, that communion. In his talk to the Society for Neuroscience in 2005, the Dalai Lama spoke on his own exploration of subatomic physics and cosmology, biology, and psychology, and how it parallels with the contemplative practices of Buddhism, how that and modern science parallel. And he said this: on the philosophical level, both Buddhism and modern science share a deep suspicion of any notion of absolutes, whether conceptualized as a transcendent being, as an eternal, unchanging principle such as soul, or as a fundamental substratum of reality. In the Buddhist investigation of reality, at least in principle, empirical evidence should triumph over scriptural authority, no matter how deeply venerated a scripture may be. Very similar to the idea Ernest Holmes always said was, be open at the top. Scientists must be open at the top. If they weren't, E equals MC squared probably wouldn't have shown up. Many other ideas on how the universe works, how the universe began, how the universe expands, wouldn't happen if they didn't have a feeling, a faith, an open at the top imaginative idea going on. So when you are stricken with anything that slows you from using your divine matrix constructively, the biggest and greatest and most powerful idea is to stop reacting to the negative with fear, disgust, hurt, or even surprise. I'm not saying that if you do so for a couple of minutes when it first happens, that that's a bad thing. No, you need to get that out. And don't just reread some book when this happens. Go ahead and do that, but don't just do that and expect things to just all of a sudden go away, all of a sudden be helpful. You got to look the way of your vision. Look the way of that information, that inspiration from that book, from that teacher, from that idea. And then you have to do the work in your imagination. You have to do the work in your feelings. You have to do the work in your action. Look this way and focus on the power that is within you. Look this way and open your mind and heart, your very consciousness, to the source of all. Use your imagination to tap into the divine within. That's what makes change. That's what moves your perspective in and focus in a way that becomes creative, constructive, positive in your life. As Neville Goddard wrote, life calls on us to believe not less, but more. Our chosen vision, whether it is this one or a combination of this and your personal one, leads us back to our most precious and powerful selves. Our chosen vision of life leads us to respond from our conscious mind with power, love, and grace, and to impress on our unconscious mind and our subconscious mind with wisdom, feeling, and imagination. Our vision of life consciously envisioned, not just seeing, but envisioned. That's a not only a brain function, but a heart function and a gut function. It's a full body function. Our vision of life, envisioned, embodied, enacted, and constantly revisited. It's okay to constantly revisit it, creates success. Your vision for life, that's what creates success, because that's what brings your perspective into light, brings your perspective not only into your head, but into your actions. It is our perspective which leads to our thoughts, which then leads to our beliefs, and finally ends up in our experiences. That's the way God planned it. That's the way God wants it to be. In The Secret of Imagining, Neville once told a crowd that the day will come, you will taste this power that you possess. You will come into a room just like this, and you will still it. You will make it still. Not by commanding anyone in the room to be still. Leave them just as they are. But you will arrest within yourself an activity that you feel, and as you still it in you, everything that you observe becomes still, perfectly still. You could go forward and examine them because the life is in you. You release the activity, and they once more become animated and continue to do what they intended to do. And you could, when you stilled the activity within you, change their motivation And when you release it, they will do entirely different from what they intended to do prior to your arrestment within you of that activity. So what's he saying? Now, he used the word feeling. I would use the word emotion, and I would narrow that word emotion to reaction. So when something happens, when you enter the room, you're not reacting to the room. You're responding to the room with a feeling. And that feeling changes the energy around you so that what comes to you in that room is based on your response, based on your perspective, based on your vision of your life. Again, this is responding versus reacting, looking this way instead of the way of the chaotic condition that may occur. Looking this way instead of the opinion of others. Looking this way instead of letting old stories trigger you. Looking this way empowers the best of you. So I ask you to join me in looking the way of your divine self. And if the whirling dervishes or monkey minds show up, okay, fine. They showed up. Strike a power pose for 2 minutes. Did you ever do that? I've talked about this before. Strike a power pose. Strike a power pose could be Wonder Woman or Superman or something like that. There is scientific evidence that when you strike a power pose for 2 minutes, it does several things. One, it increases your testosterone levels 20%. Yes, females too. 20%. Those are levels that give you a power within, that give you an assertiveness. Your cortisol levels, on the other hand, drop about 15%. Which is fabulous because sometimes when you're in those situations, your cortisol level goes up because there's some stress, there's maybe some fear. But when you strike this pose, strike the pose for 2 minutes or so, your cortisol level drops 15%. That could be just enough for you to turn around, to turn all your ideas around so you stop reacting and start responding. And finally, it makes you 30% more likely to take dynamic action, to be more assertive, to remember who you are. The power and presence that is within you right here, right now. The one who can vibrate at the speed of the divine. Those small percentages, 30%, 15%, 20%, could help you, could assist you, could be the catalyst for you to take back your power and perspective. Look this way. Look this way. And let your vision illuminate your very presence. Inform your every thought. Flush out your subconscious junk and inspire your every action. Look this way through your divine powered self. And you will not only feel your magnificence, you will rock the world with your magnificence. Thank you so much. Namaste.